was my dream job in management consulting that literally took my breath away. From monotonous tasks every week, burnout and anxiety, I had reached a stage where I thought something terrible was going to happen to me or that I was going to die. I was having my first panic attack. I was living what was every 20-year-old's dream. After university and a degree in finance, I had gotten into 3 of the big 4 accounting firms in the world. And I also had a very flourishing career as a food and travel writer. Yet, on that day, I felt choked. So, just to show you a glimpse of my life, I was going to the most sought-after places in the country. I mean, eating ambrosial food by the best chefs in the world. I was going to launch parties every weekend. I was also going to places where the walls were encrusted in gold. Yet, there was something missing. I was experiencing all the luxuries of life, but I felt still choked. And so, fast forward to now, I spend every morning waking up to teach people from across the world how to do one of the most fundamental activities of our kind, breathing, but breathing consciously. My introduction to breathwork and taking up yoga as a career happened at what I would like to call my elevator pitch moment. Now, when most of us think of an elevator pitch, it's either to pitch our startup or to get funding. But my elevator pitch was very different. It took me to my dharma. And it was at one of the job interviews, yes, I went in for another one, where I was on the brink of having my second panic attack. And this time, I was better equipped to deal with it. I had learned a practice that is called Samavriti Pranayama or box breathing from my first spiritual guide, my grandmother, whose knowledge about yoga, Ayurveda, and the slow life knew no bounds. And so I started doing that practice in the elevator. Someone else happened to join me there. And the interview went really well. Long story short, I didn't end up getting that job because there was an anti-poaching agreement with the company that I was working at. But it really was one of the best interviews that I had done. And the interviewer came to me after the interview and he said, "Sorry you didn't get that job, but with that breath thing, I really think you're on to something." And so I decided to embark on this journey to teach more people how to breathe better. And I realized that we don't really pay attention to the one thing, one superpower that all of us are equipped with. I come from a family of very impactful teachers. So my dad is a physicist and a space scientist who spent a lot of his time teaching at schools in Africa. And 2 of my grandparents taught at small village schools in Kerala. I knew when I was growing up that I wanted to share something with the world, but I just didn't know what. Until that very moment, I decided to share this practice with the world. So I went on to do my first teacher training program at an ashram in my hometown in Kerala. And as part of our teacher training program, we were made to study the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, which is like the holy grail at every yoga teacher training program. And there we learned one of the sutras from the first chapter, the Samadhi Pada, which reads Prachardana Vidharanabhyan Va Pranasya. It talks about how you can change your mind using just the breath. And that 1 month that I spent at the ashram, I noticed how changing my body to different postures using the breath or doing an asana practice, doing pranayama and kriya practices changed my body for sure, changed my breath in some way, but ultimately it started to change my mind. I was able to distance myself from the different thoughts that were arising in my mind. And that's when I came back to the city, thinking I was now equipped with this new superpower. But I realized that most people in the cities were focusing and upgrading the different other aspects of their lives. They were focusing on the food that was going into their body. They were focusing on the amount of water that they got. They were focusing on the amount of sleep, not the quality, but the amount of sleep that they got. They were also focusing on the lights in their room, if they brought out certain emotions. And this version of bougie me that you saw earlier, we were also focusing on things like a pillow menu at many of the hotels that I went to. But nobody was talking about the one thing that really mattered. We breathe in close to 6 liters of air on an average per minute. And yet, we choose to be rather unconscious about this activity. And breathing has a direct impact on most of the functions in our body, from digestion, sleep, our stress response, all through what is known as the longest nerve of the cranial system, the vagus nerve. It also has an effect on the prefrontal cortex of the brain that affects our cognitive abilities. Yet, most of us choose to breathe like a tiger is going to pounce on us any moment in fight or flight mode. So that's when, to test this hypothesis a little more, I went on to do another program, which was a very transformative experience for me. I went on to do a Vipassana program. Those of you who are not familiar with what Vipassana is, we spend almost 10 days completely cut off from the outside world, not talking to anybody. You can't even gesture or look at anybody. And at that point, we did a practice called as Anapanasati, where we just focus on the breath. Focus on every in-breath and out-breath. And during that time, I realized how impactful that practice was. It was a practice where I could either focus on the breath or think of the thoughts that were arising in my mind. And while focusing on the breath, there was this space that I could create between thoughts. And I started to feel like a wave of calm was flowing through me, and I felt so much more peaceful. So I would like to invite all of you to a very short breath awareness practice. If you could sit comfortably with your legs uncrossed, palms facing up, resting on your thighs, spine lengthened. Trust me, this is going to be short. I can see some of your faces wondering, why is this lady making me do meditation in the midst of a TED talk? But I'd love to know how you feel after this experience. Try and sit with your spine lengthened, the shoulders relaxed. And if you're comfortable, keep your eyes closed. And just spend some time here, letting go, trying to relax your body. And simply bring your awareness to the breath. Start to notice the rhythm of your breath. Trying to find a connection there. Anytime the mind wanders, try to slowly bring your awareness back to your body and back to the pace of your breath. And whenever you're ready, very slowly and gently open your eyes. How was that practice? Good. Okay. And do you experience this regularly? Okay. What if I were to ask you, how many parts of breathing did you notice as you were doing this breathing practice? So generally, most of us tend to notice the two parts of breathing, inhale and the exhale. But what if I told you we have 4 different parts of the breath? One is the inhale, which is called the puraka. Then you have a hold, a very short hold if you're breathing normally before the inhale and the next exhale, which we call antarkumbhaka. And then you have the exhale, which is rechaka. And then you have a short hold before the next inhale, which we call bahya kumbhaka. Now, all of the breathing practices that are devised are just changes in the rhythm and pace of these 4 parts of breathing. And by working with these practices, like I said, you can work on changing all the major functions in the body. So after my Vipassana program, I also came across, I spent some time in this place called Tiruvannamalai, and I came across some writings of Ramana Maharishi, who was a very famous Indian sage. And he talks about, in the few times that he has spoken, he talks about how breath control is the means for mind control. So anytime you want to work on anything that's going on in the mind, the best way to do that is to use the breath. And now life comes a full circle. I enjoy going back to the communities that I was a part of. I enjoy going back to schools and universities, teaching students how they can use their breath to improve focus, to improve concentration, to reduce their stress response. I also work a lot with athletes. I work with many of the Indian national teams, where I teach them how they can work on better carbon dioxide balance, which helps to improve stamina, helps to improve endurance, and really allows them to perform at the peak, at their highest level, by increasing energy efficiency. I also enjoy going back to corporates and teaching programs where they're more aware of states when they're moving towards burnout. They're able to really take control of their stress and be free. Another group that I really enjoy going back to are my bougie friends, where I teach them practices which will help them discover the ultimate luxury of life, to be able to breathe freely, and introduce them to three of the most important aspects for me: peace, joy, and time. Another thing I love doing is experimenting with the extremities of where the breath can take us. So 2 of the experiences I did recently. One is the Wim Hof experience, where you do certain breathing practices similar to some of the practices that are derived from the Eastern traditions, like a hyperventilation practice, which is similar to Bastrika, and a hold practice, which is similar to some of the Kumbhaka holds that we do. And using these practices, be able to sit in a tub of ice cold water. That taught me how you can be comfortable with discomfort. And this is a practice that really helps to improve immunity. Some of it is quite prevalent in our tradition for the longest time. You'll see Swamis going into the Mansarovar lake with absolutely nothing and being able to survive there for long periods of time. The second practice that I did is something called free diving, where you explore the deepest depths of the ocean using one single breath. And this breath is very similar to the yogic breathing technique, where you fill up the abdomen, the chest, all the way up to the clavicle. And the current record for free diving stands at 136 meters. And to put things into perspective, this is a little higher than the Statue of Liberty. And all of this in one single breath. That is the power of breathing right. So I encourage all of you to make this unconscious activity conscious so that it will really help to change your perspective of life. And as I like to say at the end of a Shavasana, breathe, breathe, breathe. Because after all, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. Thank you. Namaste.